You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
Celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. We've entitled this episode, Fan of February. Why? Sometimes it's hard to be a fan of February. Well, maybe if you have plans to go someplace warm, but if you're a die-hard New Englander like me, you'd have to buck up and put up with all the snow and everything else and ice and Well, of course, I am a big fan of word origins. So I had to look up what is the origin of the word February. And I found out that back in the Roman calendar, they didn't even have separate months kind of in the winter. It was just kind of like winter. It's like, yeah, sometimes we feel like that and it goes on forever. But then the second Roman emperor instituted some more months to make it so it was kind of more in line with the seasonal year. And he put in January and February. And January was named for Janus, the Roman god of doorways, and had two faces. Janus looked backward and looked forward. February, there wasn't even a god that they named after. After they named February, they named a god after that. But the word came from something about purification. Februa. Hold on. Februa and the festival Februalia was a time of purification and washing. And that becomes kind of interesting when we think about Pisces is a sign that starts in February, and it is a sign that's a lot about spirituality, and many times for spiritual rituals, you need to be cleansed first. So for instance, think of this on Maundy Thursday, the night of the Last Supper. Jesus washed the feet of all of his disciples. Now, of course, when you were traveling around the roads of Jerusalem or wherever, I'm sure your feet got really dirty because you only wore sandals. So, I mean, foot washing was pretty common, but he was doing it in a ritualistic way of honor and respect. So, think of this. The Roman civilization had their baths, and I'm sure that the upper classes bathed really regularly. But it might be that when you get to that sort of midway through the winter time frame, maybe some of the lower classes or the slave classes, everybody needed a bath by then. So it became this holiday of purification. So we might also think on a more, say, spiritual level, that this is a very good time for us to look within and kind of see what do we need to purify in ourselves. We have in February the two signs, first Aquarius and then Pisces, that are ruled by planets that are out past Saturn, past the limits of the visible naked eye, and planets that were only discovered once we had telescopes. So these are what we call the transcendental planets, or some people call them the modern planets. And they do have more to do with our sort of connections with people in more than just an everyday way. So we can also think of this as a kind of special month. And I think that's the only time we have one month that contains two signs that are consecutive, that are both ruled by these invisible planets. So when we think on the invisible level of our lives, you know, these are the unseen things. when I first started preparing for this show, I don't know, I had taken my glasses off somewhere and I couldn't find where I put them. Well, that happens from time to time. Like, nowadays, you take off a sweater because all of a sudden, it's almost too hot because the heat's been turned up. And, well, when you don't have 20/20 vision anymore, like I did in my youth, things are a little bit fuzzy when you don't have your glasses on. And I said, sometimes it's good to soften the edges of things or to look at things in a more impressionistic way, kind of like, the Impressionist paintings, that if you're up close to an Impressionist painting, it's dot, 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 dot. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You get 10, 15 feet away from it, and oh, fabulous. So this is what we have with sort of imperfect vision. And thinking about that unseen level, or even a blurred level. Now, I was just listening to a program on NPR talking about the importance of mindset, and they were even speaking about placebos. Why does a placebo work? This is when they're doing like a study of a new drug, and they give part of the study group the real medication, and the other people they give a sugar pill. And they even see some of the effects of what they're trying to test for. I mean, if they've told you, okay, we're seeing if this will relax you when you're in a stressed state. And even the people who are taking the sugar pill feel more relaxed because something in their brain and in their consciousness has told them, oh, this is going to help me relax. So moms, when you kiss your baby's boo-boo, make it better, and you say, I'm going to make this better, and the kid believes that, it has that effect that it can actually aid the healing process. So I was also hearing, I know where it was, at the Astrological Society of Connecticut, we had a speaker on astrology and yoga. And she was talking about, I'll give her name, Twink McKinney, and she did a great talk, talking about the subconscious is so much more powerful than we have ever even given it credit for or thought about. So to really tune into both what your conscious thoughts are and working with meditation, which is a very Aquarius or Uranus kind of activity, and then to groove into that more blissful space out or dreamland or, playing to the strengths of the mind's belief system is a Piscean thing, or Neptune, the ruler of Pisces. So this pairing also is what contains the New Age crossover degree. So these great ages, and when we speak of that, we mean there's a cycle of 26,000 years that infinitesimally, it's hard to say, spring starts a little bit earlier every year. I mean just a little bit. But over the course of time, spring moves through, it might have started in Aries back in the Greek days. And then since the time of Christ, spring has started in the part of the zodiac where the fish are, in the Pisces part. And now it's moving into where the water bearer, Aquarius, is. So this is where we say we're dawning into the age of Aquarius. We're in the shift over. And that borderline, the cusp, is the final degree of Aquarius and the very beginning degree of Pisces, because these great ages move backwards because it's going a little bit earlier. So that last day of Aquarius, first day of Pisces, which is usually around the 18th to 19th or so of February, is when we have that dawning of the age of Aquarius degree. So I'm looking in my Janet's Planets 2016 to see just what day that was. This year it's the 19th. And I think that's pretty typical in most years. But every 4 years we stick that extra day in on the end of February and make it 29 days instead of 28, and that's leap year and leap day. And then the matchup between the dates in our calendar and the degrees of the zodiac shifts a little bit. And what you'll find is if you have your birthday chart calculated, called the solar return, which means the return of the sun to that precise part of the zodiac where it was when you were born, it might happen on a calendar day, not the anniversary of your birthday or of your birth. Sometimes it'll be the calendar day before, sometimes it'll be the calendar day after. So with leap day shoved in this year, people whose birthday comes after the 29th of February are going to find that their solar return is off from their calendar birthday. And I think it's like the day after is what's going to be happening. So let's talk a little bit more about being a fan of February this year. You know, one of the big things that's going on in the sky now, and it does involve the sign of Pisces, is Chiron is moving through there. Now, Chiron has never been given official planetary status. I don't know why. Maybe they'll redefine planets again and give it an upgrade. But it is possibly a comet that got captured into our solar system, and it falls in the solar system out between Saturn, that end of the visible planets, and Uranus, the first planet beyond. And it has a wide orbit. It almost comes into Saturn and almost goes out to Uranus. Now that's a big difference because Saturn goes around in about 29 years and Uranus in 84 years, and the average for Chiron is 51 years in there. So Chiron is nicknamed the wounded healer, has a lot to do with exposing what is the weak link in a system, your body or some other system, so that it can be healed or repaired or improved. And in mythology, Chiron was the father of medicine. He was a centaur. He was half man and half god. And actually, well, centaurs are horse up till about the chest and then man's head. And when he got poisoned, he couldn't die, and so he suffered on and on for a long time. So that has something to do with this part about the wounded healer. So in the sky now, with Chiron going through Pisces, the opposite sign is Virgo, and that's where Jupiter is traveling. And Jupiter is the biggest planet, and it kind of expands anything that it has contact with. And contact exactly across the sky from each other usually brings in tension, or things that come at us from outside of us rather than what wells up from inside of us. So we will find that this month, I believe it might even be on the day of the new moon on February 8th, that Jupiter and Chiron are exactly opposite each other. Nope, it's not that day. Okay, but it's close. Of course, I had some notes on this, but I don't know. They didn't come to the studio with me today, so what can I tell you? It's almost at the full moon. It's the day after the full moon on the 23rd of February is this exact opposition. And it will have happened before, November 3rd last year and comes again August 12th this year. So sometimes we see activities that have a connection between the three dates when there's a repeating connection between the planets. Well, what this might mean is that it's a time where we feel our pain worse, or we see the need for repair and improvement in a bigger way, or it's happening on a larger scale, or we might even say Jupiter is the planet that has to do with international relations. And Chiron might say, oh, what are the weak links there, and how are we going to be shoring those up? You know, in our own country, I think of things like Russia. We have a very tenuous relationship with them right now, and that certainly needs improving. And oh boy, we won't even start talking about North Korea. So, but we might see some steps around this full moon in February towards either the situation gets worse before it gets better, or it works on trying to get better. And what we have also going on with this is Saturn is making a T-square with them from the sign of Sagittarius, where it's going, it's been in there for some months and got a couple years to go. That's Jupiter's sign of rulership. So it again brings in this idea of things about international or other things that Jupiter and Sag rule are institutions of higher education, legislation, and travel and communication far and wide. So things like the internet and the media are all involved with that. And Saturn's function is to corral things in, give them some limitations, rules to play by. So we might find more discussion about, the rules that the legislature is playing by and things like that. Well, another thing that's interesting besides this T-square, and I guess I should also mention, If you happen to be a Virgo, a Sagittarius, a Pisces, or even Gemini, which is the sign opposite Sagittarius, and those four make kind of a cross, you might be feeling extra difficulty in your life around this full moon on the 22nd of February. I know I'm trying to make you a fan of it. It's a bigger opportunity to make improvements on the things that really need help. Okay, so another thing that this opposition, it's called, between Chiron and Jupiter is involved in is in a particular kind of triangle. If you remember your geometry, it's an isosceles triangle. And it's comprised of planets that are 5 signs in the zodiac apart, and those have nothing in common, and they sort of have a mismatch. They're called inconjunct to one another, and they show a little bit of sort of a need to build a bridge. So we can have this type of pattern. It's nicknamed a finger of God or a yod, and sometimes we wonder if God's showing us a finger that signals some problem, but really it's the pointer finger, and it's pointing us a little bit different from where we think we're going. I call this pattern the divine detour because it works like this. Weird event A leads to bizarre event B, and we go, if everything's for a reason, what's the reason for this A and B? But B leads to C, and we go, oh, C is cool. I couldn't have got to C without going through A and B. So we're going to have some of those things in February as well, where one weird thing leads to another, but it all turns out in the end just a little different than how you thought you were aiming because God is pointing you somewhere else. So this is Jupiter, Chiron in the middle of this triangle, and the other pieces of it are Uranus, which says anything can happen, the unexpected, or kind of bust free from what your restrictions have been. And on the other part of the triangle is the Sun and Moon together at the February 8 new moon. Anything that's occurring at a new moon is going to have an effect for the 4 weeks following that new moon. So this doesn't matter if your birthday is anywhere around February or not. Anybody can be experiencing this, but particularly if you do have a birthday that might be close to that February new moon, you might have experiences like this that go on at any point in the coming year for you. And it's got the feeling of Sun and Moon are in Aquarius, the sign ruled by Uranus. All of that energy says, be true to you. Do the things that are authentic, and if you're different from everybody else, celebrate that. Don't feel like the weirdo and the outcast. Instead, feel like the special one. Oh, is that how you do it, even though everybody else does it that way? Well, isn't that interesting? Okay, so there's some kind of freeing by being your own self. But what's hard about that is, how does that lead us towards maybe our spiritual perfection? Because in Virgo, Jupiter is trying to help us find our perfect self. And even Chiron is saying, oh, hey, let's find what are the blockages, or what steps do we need to take to get more to being our perfect, authentic self. So that's a big part about what's going on here in February. Another thing that's starting in February, and it's going to be a major theme for a lot of 2016, Mars is going to do a backward jaunt. I think it does it for about 70 days. And it starts that in, I think, May. But we go into the range that it's going to back up over starting in February. I think it's the 19th. So we're going to start having connections that will repeat 3 times, and they're starting up this month. So Mars is normally forward progress and gung-ho, but in this case, there's going to be a stop in your tracks and go back and look at things and how do you want to do them differently before you go forward. And the sector of the zodiac where the back and forth is happening is between the final degrees of Scorpio and the early degrees of Sagittarius. Well, Scorpio is a very kind of internal and emotional sign and has a brooding kind of quality, and on its low basest expression likes revenge. But when you get into Sagittarius, that's more about principles and acting in an open and transparent manner, and kind of taking into account that we're all sharing this world together. So we're going to see some interesting things in the political play that goes through the primary season with this Mars back and forth, whether things are going to be in the shadows or whether they're going to be exposed. You know, my idea is that some of the things that have been tried to be kept under wraps when Mars goes into Sagittarius are going to come out in the open. And then maybe when Mars goes back and backtracks into Scorpio, it's kind of be like, oh, well, let's try to sweep that under the rug again. It's like, no, because it's still going to be, you know, exposed for the truth that it is when we lift that rug up and when Mars goes back into Sagittarius. So I don't know if I can quickly find those dates or not. Probably not. Well, Mars goes into Sagittarius March 5th. So that means in this time frame from around the 19th of February to March 5th, it's going forward through those degrees of Scorpio that later it will backtrack through. Okay. So what else do we have going on in February? 3 times we have an emphasis on Neptune. Neptune is that ruler of Pisces, and in the first couple of days of a new moon cycle, the moon goes through the 30 degrees that the sun will go through during that month. And then at the end of the cycle, the moon has come back all the way around the zodiac and now retraces its steps for those degrees from the current cycle's new moon to the next cycle's new moon. I call this soul lunar three-peat because it's a moon goes through, let's say there's the 30 degrees of the zodiac. First the moon comes through and it goes on its way around the rest of the zodiac. And meanwhile the sun is plugging along through those 30 degrees. And at the end of this cycle, the moon comes back around and kind of like ties up the loose ends. So we get an opportunity to have an exposure to something in a very quick way when the moon first passes through, and in a more obvious way when the sun comes through, because the sun comes for like a whole day through a degree, where the moon goes through a degree in like, I don't know, 2 hours or something. And then the moon follows up. So Neptune is that ruler of everything that's invisible. And I always say there's kind of 2 sides to the coin with Neptune. On one side are fears. On the other side, faith, or what do we believe in. And the only way to allay the fears is to turn that coin over and see what do you need to believe more strongly in order to put the fears at bay. So that's going to be another theme here in February. And we have the first date is like the 8th of February, the new moon day, when the moon crosses the Neptune. And then the sun crosses Neptune. Oh boy, I don't have the book that tells me that. I'm not sure exactly. It's going to be around the 7th of March, somewhere in there, I think. No, that's the end of the cycle when the moon comes back. Okay. See, this is what happens when you leave your piece of paper at home. And, okay, the full moon is at 3 of Pisces, and Neptune is at 9. So it's going to be 28th of February, right around there. Okay, so what you might want to do is think about some things that you want to address as your own fears, or things that you want to use that power of your mind and your imagination on in a positive visualization way, sort of setting out of your intentions. And do that around the evening of February 8th. And then really pour it on when we get to that 28th of February as the sun is coming by that Neptune. And see if you don't have another little tweak of energy or signal from the universe or some kind of results from your actions when we get up to the March 7th when the moon comes through there again. And that next moon cycle will be an eclipse. In March, we'll have a new moon eclipse, a full moon eclipse, and we'll talk more about that next month because you'll want to know about that. But meanwhile, you might even want to think some about what kind of purification ritual you would like to do in your own life for your own Februalia. And one of the things I oftentimes tell to Pisces clients or people who have a strong Neptune when they come for a reading is I talk to them about how that's the sign or planet like makes you like a sponge, and you soak up so much of what's going on around you. And then you need to like wring out that sponge, or even to protect yourself in the first place so that you don't get other people's negativity glommed onto you. And the way I would suggest that, I used to think, oh, well, we'll use that pink bubble that Glinda travels in The Wizard of Oz. You know how she comes in the bubble and she goes back away in the bubble. And I go, well, that's a pretty flimsy looking little bubble. Somebody else said, oh, how about the mirror disco ball? And if you put one of those around your aura to protect you, you've got all those different facets in different directions and vectors. So any of that negativity that's coming at you from wherever, it bounces off. It doesn't even get through to your aura. And then, you know, at the end of the day, if you feel like you still have some negativity on you, a little bit seep through somehow, you can take what I call the psychic shower and picture whatever colored droplets you want that day as washing any negativity or any bad juju away down the drain to nowhere and harming no one, and then recharge your aura with that color of the day, or multiple colors, or rainbows, or whatever you like. So it's sort of an imaginary exercise that you can do, similar to doing affirmations, to try to improve how things are going in your life. And you don't have to be a Pisces or a Neptune person to do this. You know, we all have Neptune somewhere in our charts. You know, it's funny, when I was looking up the origin of February, they talked about how in Old English they hadn't adopted all of the, you know, Latin and Roman names for all of the months, and their names for the month of February were based on mud, like mud month, and cabbage or kale. So probably all they had left to eat by the end of the winter before the spring started growing some new vegetables for them was those old kales that have been sitting around a long time. So, as you're tromping through the mud or enjoying your kale, try to see if you can be a fan of February. It's not always easy. Now let's see if there's something else here that I wanted to be sure to mention to you. Well, I'm not sure, so I'm going to come back to the book of Janet, Janet's Planets, and see if there wasn't something more very exciting here. Oh, I know what it was. Here we go. And this one's for you, my friend Marsh, who has a birthday on the full moon. At that time, the sun has come halfway in between that ongoing Uranus-Pluto square that we've talked about a million times on Looking Up. And this has a lot to do with major change and transformation. And the middle point is sort of like as if it blended the two of them together. So it kind of says, wow, things are popping. And the moon across from that is making a real stressful kind of triangular pattern with them all. So I would say that this full moon is going to be a turning point where it's a real good time to release those things that we feel are our blockages, and to come out, like I said, to our authenticity, our center, face our fears, have our faith, and become a fan of February. We'll see you next month on Look at That.